I'm Carol Klein, and this is my home, Glebe Cottage. When I'm not presenting or writing about gardening, this is where I spend most of my time, and where I've been honing my horticultural skills for 40 years. Whether you've got a spacious plot, a tiny patio, or a few window boxes, there's nothing more exciting and satisfying than creating your own garden. From basic to more advanced techniques, I believe anyone can learn how to do it. Whether you're a complete novice or an experienced gardener, I want to help you develop the skills to make your garden grow. I'm ready. Are you? Welcome back to Glebe Cottage on this absolutely sweltering day. I mean, summer doesn't get much hotter than this, but all the flowers are absolutely loving it, and everything seems to be coming along okay. But there are a few places in my garden which are particularly exposed. They've got the full blast of the sun for most of the day, and still it's coping brilliantly well with the sunny weather. All my garden is in front of the cottage, and it's all on the southwest facing slope. So it's quite difficult gardening on the slope. We've overcome it on this side by making a lot of terraces. On the shady side, there are nice wandering paths that just meander down through the garden. One of the sunniest, most exposed of the terraces is directly in front of the cottage. When you look at these photos, it's just astonishing to think how much it's changed. I can remember making this top terrace, and look at the size of those stones. And this, I mean, some of those stones were enormous. I don't think I could pick them up now. It was quite a job, but I think it was probably worth it. Although much of the garden is exposed to full sun, the soil is heavy throughout. I really wanted somewhere, one place, where I could grow things that demand brilliant drainage, that love their heads in the sun, total sun worshippers. So I built this enormous raised bed, which has allowed me to create a really free-draining area in one of the sunniest spots. Now, I wouldn't plant any old thing on here, but the plants that I have put in are all ones that not only cope with its situation, but really relish it. And principal amongst them are euphorbias. I've got one great big Mediterranean one. I've planted lots of new ones up here, but this big plant had fabulous tall stems of flower earlier in the year. And then we had gale force winds and the whole thing was knocked over. So whilst it was lying there on the ground, I took loads and loads of cuttings, and I think they've done quite well. It's lovely to get in a bit of shade, and of course when you're potting up cuttings, that's essential really. You don't want to be doing it in hot sunshine. Now this pot is pretty heavy, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's all of them have actually successfully rooted. So these were all taken as basil cuttings way back in the spring, and all I've done to them is push them into this gritty compost, bit of grit on the top, watered them once really well, and I've kept on spraying them just to maintain the moisture levels, because of course as soon as your cutting's taken away from the plant, it's lost its source of water because it's not attached to the roots anymore. So I think, I don't know whether you can see here, but I hope this is going to work. I'll get rid of all that grit off the top, and then, please come out. Oh, it is. Woo! It is a really thrilling moment when you see these roots. Now they're quite sort of tentative and fine, so if I'd been doing these into modules, I'd just be able to push each module up and there'd be no root disturbance. But because they're all from one pot, I've just got to be immensely careful. You feel like whispering when doing it. So I'm going to take that. So I'm going to break off a little bit of that soil. When first I took these cuttings, I was wearing gloves, and that's simply because euphorbias have this sap which can really irritate your skin. But at this stage, all those stems have calloused over, there's no sap about at all. So I haven't worn gloves. The first stage when you're taking cuttings out of a pot or modules, whatever, is to put them into other pots so they actually establish themselves as individual plants. It's after that, when you've got a really good root system in there, that you can think about putting them out in the garden. Try and make sure it's central, and then just more compost right the way round. Very satisfying, isn't it, actually making cuttings. I can remember the very first cuttings I did. They were penstemons. Penstemons and hydrangeas. And I kept taking them out of the pot to see if they got roots on the bottom, which is not a good idea. Experience taught me that that's a daft idea. You've just got to let them get on with it. And they soon tell you, because, I mean, the first sign you see is roots coming through the bottom of the pot, new growth on the top, and you know then that your cutting's taken. And if you leave them for a couple of weeks after that, just to make sure they've got a really good root system, and you know they're going to be fine. So I'll top that up. And of course, the finishing touch, grit on the top. And just leave it in a cool place. If you've just transferred them on a hot day like this, it's a good idea just to keep them in a bit of shade until you know that they've taken and they're properly rooted in the pot. So this is the other side of the raised bed, and a completely different view. Although of course the conditions on the top are exactly the same right the way through here. And this has always been one of my favourite springtime flowering perennials. It's Lathyrus vernus, meaning spring flowering sweet pea, and it's called albo roseus because the flowers are the most delicate shades of pink and white. And I've only ever planted one of them, and yet now I have a whole colony, all by seed. And I just love it in amongst this euphorbia. It just looks a real picture. Now, of course, it's all green, apart from these little pods. So all the flowers have been replaced by seed pods. To show you how these little pods spread their seeds so far and wide, I've got a couple of bean pods to demonstrate. Can you see the twirly whirls in here? I mean, it started off being a flat bean like that, but now it's dispersed its seeds, and the whole thing, the way it did it, the mechanism, is just by twisting itself up like that and chucking these seeds out everywhere. And that's exactly what this has done. Well, Lathyrus vernus is a member of the pea family. And there are so many plants in that family, it's huge. And lots of them, of course, are a real treat for the eyes. But many of the others are a treat for the taste buds too. Coming up, members of the pea family running wild. When you get close and inhale, there's the most beautiful perfume, like coconut ice cream. It's delectable. I love where I live. It's actually in between two moors, Exmoor and Dartmoor. And although I live in the dip, and it's quite sort of fertile and green there. Every so often I love to come to a place like this. This is right on the edge of Exmoor. It's such a completely different environment. It feels different, and it certainly looks different. Look at this landscape. It's astonishing. It's so exposed, there's absolutely nothing between you and the elements, and nothing between the plants and the elements either. So all these plants have evolved over thousands, perhaps millions of years to live in this really hostile kind of place. And one of them is a member of the pea family. Of course, it's gorse. These great golden globes of scintillating, vivid yellow. When you get close and inhale, there's the most beautiful perfume. It's almost edible. It's like coconut, or even sweeter than that, like coconut ice cream. It's delectable. That's a very deliberate policy on the part of the plant, just to bring in pollinating insects. You can actually see that when pollination has taken place, of course, this plant will be covered with seed pods. At the same time, there'll be more flowers coming on, but when those seed pods explode and are catapulted, I can see all around me. I had to be careful I didn't sit on one. Little baby gorse just springing up here and there. Even when the grass around here just sizzles and gets completely dried out, gorse will just carry on relentlessly. It's got these spiny leaves too, which help protect the cuticle of the leaf from brilliant sunshine. It's just such a beautiful sight. It's said that the Swedish botanist Linnaeus, who gave us the system to actually name our plants, when he first came to the British Isles and came across a heathland full of gorse and heather, just fell on his knees at the sight. It was just so wonderful, and praised God. Back in my garden, under the relentless sun, there are other plants from the pea family that also enjoy exposed conditions. Well, gorse is a really wild member of the pea family, but perhaps the pea that's most familiar in our gardens has to be the sweet pea. And we grow it, of course, for its fragrance. Just delicious. But its cousins, runner beans and all their ilk, we grow because we want to eat them. But there are peas on trees too. I just adore this tree. It's a cercis. My mum grew it in the first place. But now it's all in leaf, and you can really appreciate its bark and its greenery. But back in the spring, it was something else that just drew your attention. From all these branches, the whole tree was smothered in pinky purple pea flowers, just masses and masses of them coming straight out of the wood. And you could see immediately that they were peas. It's just a beautiful, beautiful tree. And there are vivid and gorgeous blooms aplenty in the pea family. I'm going to plant a Laspedeza, a shrub that will soon be displaying equally showy flowers. Anybody who sees it in full flower would just fall in love with it. It's got arching growth, very elegant, and it's smothered in magenta flowers in late summer, but right the way through into the autumn. Well, this is going to be its home, at least for the next few months. It's an enormous tree pot inside this big copper cauldron. I'm not casting any spells today. I just want to plant this Laspedeza. Before I go and get my shrub and actually plant it, I want to tidy up this dahlia. I want to deadhead it, because that's going to make it produce lots more flowers. Now, can you see in there already it had one enormous flower first of all, but instead of taking those two down to there, if I take them right down to this joint where you can see those two new shoots which are actually going to produce buds. Look, that was done with this one earlier, and here's its bud. We'll have more magenta flowers very, very soon. So this is where it's going to go. It comes from China and Japan. A lot of the most elegant shrubs do. And its common name is bush clover. And just have a look at these leaves. Aren't they pea-like? You can see the resemblance straight away. Well, it's not just a resemblance, it's a family characteristic. Like most members of the pea family, this Laspedeza loves full sun and well-drained soil. Now, normally when you're planting a shrub, you wouldn't imagine planting it in a container. It's quite an unusual practice. And eventually, no doubt, this Laspedeza will end up in the ground. But for now, I think it's going to look terrific in here. Let's have a go. Oh, look at that. That's pretty good. So look, these will come out. Can you see the buds right at the top here now? And eventually, this is going to be arching right down here, and it will be covered in magenta flowers. It's an easy shrub. Tiny bit on the tender side. Give it a bit of protection, or plant it somewhere where you know it's not going to get whacked by frost and wind. And then just enjoy it. Whether it's in a container or whether it's planted in the ground, all Laspedezas love sunshine. In fact, just about every member of the pea family loves to be in a sunny place. But I think, short of a really good watering, that's it for now with this. I'm just going to let it do its thing. Tidying up those dahlias reminds me that although many things are blooming happily in the intense sun of high summer, daily maintenance is more important than ever. Although it sounds like quite a leisurely activity, in actual fact deadheading is one of the most vital tasks that you can perform, especially at this time of year. What it means is that instead of things going to seed, and therefore the plant feeling that it's completed its circuit and it doesn't have to bother much anymore, it means that once you've removed those old flowers, the new buds can open and you get a continuous display. Cosmos is one of the plants which really makes the summer, and if you keep on taking these old dead heads, going right down to the point at which you can see new buds starting to come, then it means they'll get the opportunity to open. It'll be their time in the sun. Now in this case I've got one on the end. It's already been deadheaded once, so I'm going to take it right back down to the next leaf axil, and that means that not only does this flower look gorgeous, but these buds at the base are going to come up and flower too. By that time, of course, I'll have deadheaded that one. So it really is something you need to do as frequently as you possibly can. And what's nice about it is when you stand back and look at your plant, it really does look, oh I missed one, it really does look pristine. So this is a oculus or oculus. It's derived from the Greek meaning beauty of the day, and it sure is beautiful. But each of these flowers do only last one day, and when they've finished you get these really sort of unhappy looking buds that spoil the look of the plant. It's growing here in one of the most exposed places. They're really in full sun, absolutely baking, and this raised bed means that anything that's planted right at the edge of it is going to be the first thing to suffer from lack of water. But look how they're thriving, and that's because where they come from they grow in very, very exposed places. There's even one species which grows on cliffs, right bang in full sun. I think they look wonderful, particularly this variety. This is Stafford. If you wanted to grow more of this, you dig it up during the winter or the early spring and just pull it apart. Really straightforward to divide. And then replant your bits or pot a few of them up too, so you'll have a whole load of new plants to go at. And who wouldn't want more of this? But if I want this to look as good as it possibly can, then it's a sort of daily task. It's quite therapeutic too, just to come down here and break off these old flowers. And if you're just really careful, you can leave the little teeny stem behind, because if you start cutting it, it really doesn't look nice. But you keep the whole structure by just taking them off. And because it's so hot, they're all shrivelling like mad. Look at that. Just coming off so easily. It really is very satisfying doing this. And when you've done one, you look at it and it looks so beautiful. And it's just the right colour in this belting sunshine too. I'll take that bit of fennel stem off, then you can really see the beauty of these. And move right across this, just gathering them willy-nilly all the way across. And I know after a few minutes the whole thing is going to look like a different plant. It's going to look new and fresh. And if I do this every day, probably just after breakfast, this should go on looking great for weeks and weeks and weeks. There is no smell to match that, is there? Although there are lots of ornamental, decorative members of the pea family, when you think about peas, you're thinking about food. They're edible, aren't they? And you can't have too many peas. Now I want to sow a few of these. This is a pea I've never grown before. It's called Douce Provence. But the great thing about it is you can sow it practically right the way through the year. Peas form such an important part of so many people's diets all around the world. There are so many different kinds of peas, pulses, lentils of all sorts too. These are lovely red lentils that make dal. I'm so fond of dal, it's gorgeous. And these with the most beautiful name, pea lentils. They're brilliant. But they all come out of pods and they all belong to the pea family. They're all packed with protein, masses of it. These actually are haricot beans, but I didn't buy them. They didn't come out of a packet. I grew them and we ate lots of them fresh and then let them ripen up and dried them out. And they're just brilliant in the winter because they store wonderfully well. Nearly all members of this family store well. In your garden, you can sow them for ages too, and they really lend themselves to successional sowing. But peas, things like broad beans, you can sow just about at any time at all. Now, up in the veg trough, I've got a whole row of peas which I'm just about to harvest. But I sowed some more here. This is Hirsch green shaft. It's the same one as I've sown up there. And they're just in modules and I can push them out and put them in a little row anywhere at all, just to fill a corner. But I want some more after that. So I'm sowing these Douce Provence. Isn't it nice? I just wanted an excuse to say it again in here. And once they're watered, they'll germinate really literally in just a few days. Did you ever do that thing at school where you put a broad bean down the side of a jam jar with blotting paper and you could actually see those roots coming out and then that shoot coming up? Totally magic, really wonderful. These might take a little bit longer, but they'll soon be up. And after that, we'll soon be eating them. those down there. Now, some of my beans here, this is one called Blauhild, and it's deep purple and it's got lovely purple flowers, and it'll have purple beans, but it's got a bit out of control. It's got beside itself. So I want to give it a helping hand. A few weeks ago, I filled this bed with plants that look after each other in an arrangement that Native Americans call the Three Sisters. So pumpkins, I've substituted courgettes, beans and sweet corn, or maize as they'd call it. All three of those things you can actually store over the winter. So as well as eating them fresh, you can actually save the seed as well for the next generation, the next spring. So the idea is the sweet corn's planted, the bean climbs up it, and then the pumpkin, or in this case the courgette, covers the ground in between, so it shields it from baking hot sun, so it doesn't dry out so quickly, and it also suppresses weeds. Well, I have to offer one of these plants a bit of extra help, I think, because one of the Three Sisters is a bit racy and she's getting ahead of herself. So these beans have reached the top of these poles and then they don't know where to go. In some cases, they're twisting back down again. I think this is as long as any of them. So what I'm going to attempt to do, should be good fun if nothing else, is make them a sort of alternative route going right the way across. Now I want to tie this on with this string, but I think I'll have to tie the string on first, just above a knot on the bamboo cane, because that is going to stop it slipping down. But also I'm going to give it the real double knot treatment. Hang on, bean, help is at hand. And then theoretically, this can come here. This is going to go over there. I don't think they're going to make me an honorary member of the Boy Scouts, are they? But I think it'll do. It's great fun. We're going to have this big crisscross of beans, and hopefully eventually there'll be all these lovely purple beans just draped down. So I want one on this other end too. I've been bamboozled. And no beans were hurt in the fulfilling of this wonderful scaffolding. Beans, like any other climbing plant, will find their way on their own. But in this case, I'm just going to give it a helping hand. That's it. And I'll just have to carry on right round here. There might be some time. With the beans now reaching for the skies, I can see there's a space in my veg bed that's crying out for a row of peas. Now this trench is just an inch, maybe going on for 2 inches deep, and the whole idea is that you sow right the way along. And I sow in threes, so that means when they start growing that you can put some twiggy pea sticks in there, some piggy twig sticks, and you'll get quite a neat row, but they'll all help each other either side of that. So about a couple of inches in between that way, and exactly the same between the rows this way too. It really is child's play. In fact, it's a great thing for kids to do. And it's very satisfying, isn't it, when you sow something like this and then you see those plants coming up so rapidly. Peas are totally hardy. I'm using my favourite. This is Hurst Green Shaft. You get loads and loads of peas to a pod, and they seem to be pretty trouble-free altogether. From time to time I'll give these a little liquid feed. Organic seaweed feed is ideal. It's good for absolutely everything. It's brilliant stuff. We're not the only ones who love peas. Pigeons, those pesky pigeons and mice, very often will come out and start digging about in your row. And you know, devastate the whole thing. But I've got a cunning plan. I'm going to use another member of the pea family to make sure that that doesn't happen. Look at this. Spikiness personified. It's exactly what I need to protect those peas. So before I start with my gorse garnish, I want to fill in this trench. I'll use a bit of the soil from the end of the row. What a treat, you lucky peas. And then I'm just going to bring some of this across. Anyway, I'm hoping that what I'm going to put on top of here will deter. Just one look should be enough to put off those pigeons and mice. So I didn't collect this on the moor, I've collected it from my hedge. There are a few bits here and there. I've never tried this before, so I really hope it's going to work. And I'm going to chop it up in pieces. Put it back here, I think, so you can see just what I'm doing. So little short bits. Got to have enough stem just to make sure you're sticking it right in the centre of this trench. Get it gone in. They're good, these gloves, but I don't think they were really meant for gorsing. Got a new verb. To gorse. And I think providing you've got it, you know, reasonably in the centre of this and pushed in the centre of the trench, or what was the trench, which is now filled in, and it's firmly into the soil. I think that's going to deter any predators. Hard to think of pigeons as predators, isn't it? But they would be if they came and ate all my peas. So, here we go. And once the pea shoots are a couple of inches high, I'll take out the gorse, because I certainly don't want it around when I start picking them, that's for sure. In the meantime, I'll be surprised if it doesn't keep the pigeons away. Meanwhile, in my concrete veg trough, there are some peas ready for harvesting. It's a very joyful moment when you actually start picking your peas, and even more joyful when you start eating them. So I want to move in and pick as many of them as I possibly can. Yeah, through a whole plant like this, you'll get some peas that develop later, so you can carry on picking them with a bit of luck for a couple of weeks. But these are the best ones, the ones you pick first. And all you do is hang on to the plant and just take it off with a little bit of a stem. Look at these hanging down here. I mean, you couldn't get more exposed than this, and you couldn't get a hotter day than this. I hope not anyway. But still, they're really happy. I mean, they're actually fulfilling their function, aren't they? All plants want to make the next generation. So they want to set seed, and these are contained in this pod are the seeds of the next generation of peas. I'll probably save a few of them too at the end of cropping. So I can sow some, I can keep them over winter, and I can sow some next year too. Oh, look at this. I'm going to have a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's pretty good. But I know there are going to be loads and loads of these left when my grandchildren come. They're coming in a couple of days, and they love podding peas. Beautiful. I want a few of my carrots to eat with these peas for tonight. So I'm just going to dig down here. This is the first row we sowed, and they've been quite good so far. Look at that, that's not bad, is it? So a few more carrots here. And then I'm just exposing another plant, which I didn't put here at all. It may be an interloper, but it is another member of the pea family. It's white clover. White clover is just the best plant in the world as far as bees are concerned. It's brilliant, but it's also incredibly good for your soil. And if I can get one of these roots up and show you this, probably got a carrot with it. Here we go. Look at that, all those gorgeous leaves. And if you look here on the roots, you see these little white nodules. And all peas, all legumes, everything in that family has these on its roots. So what happens is that these gorgeous green leaves take in nitrogen from the air and they transfer it through the plant down along the roots, and these nodules all along the roots actually store that nitrogen, and then when the plant starts to die, that nitrogen is transferred into the soil. And the same goes for the peas themselves. Their roots will also have nitrogen fixing nodules. What I'm going to do when these peas are finally over is chop them off at ground level when we've harvested them all, and of course the tops will go into the compost heap, but those roots I'll actually leave in the soil, because then they'll go on making the soil better and better. Still to come, how to make a tiny bed both productive and beautiful.
Màu phai sương em dân quê lên chốn đô thành tha phương, bao tâm tư gói ghém vào bao phong thư, em không xem xong hóa hư tàn hư không. Và người anh thương một trang giấy ngàn vạn tâm tư, người cốt tay một người vẫn chờ người nơi đây, mà ai vui bên tình đắm say, nước mắt chảy ngược phía chân mây sông.
Thế quán em có cái gì? Quán em có thịt trâu. Quán cháu có cái gì? Quán cháu có 1 cân kg đào siêu ngọt cơ. Vào đây em ơi, vào đây em ơi. Cả quán chị đã nào? Quán chị có cái gì? Quán chị có cái gì? Cô ơi, vào đây. Quán chị có cái gì? Quán chị có cái gì? 1 cân kg thỏ. 1, 2, 3. Cô.
Back in May, I started an exciting new project beside the shed. It's a miniature potager. I love the way that this potager's coming on. This is a place where I want to combine things that are edible with things that are just ornamental in the true sort of French fashion. It's a technique that's usually found on a grand scale in chateau gardens. Most of them are quite expansive. This is tiny, but it doesn't matter, it's packed full with stuff. I love the fact that these sweet peas are white and lavender. It's just perfect with the agastache, with this feverfew that I didn't put in, it just put itself there. And we've even got purple beans growing up here. So this is the perfect place to add another member of the pea family, a real exhibitionist. Lupins are such familiar plants, and yet they haven't been knocking around in British gardens for nearly as long as a lot of the perennials that we grow. They come from the Americas, from the USA and from Canada. And there's one that grows wild there called Nucanensis, which is a gorgeous blue colour. And it's escaped actually over here. And I can remember seeing this sea of blue all along the canal that runs from Bolton into Manchester, where they used to pull the cotton in barges. It was just massive amounts of blue just waving off into the distance. But it wasn't until 1911 when a Yorkshire allotment holder called George Russell started to develop his own strain of lupins that these wonderful plants were born. Now, these are more modern ones, but they developed directly from those that he grew. But if you've got really chalky, limey soil, don't bother. They really don't like it. They prefer acid soil. They'll grow in most neutral soils too, and I know they're going to absolutely love living in my potager. What a grand, such a range of colours. That's nice in there. And I think this is one of my favourite plants, this Sedalcia, and that's a complete contrast because this is soft and gentle, and that's positively strident, isn't it? But I like that sort of juxtaposition. So I'm going to put this one, this is Cashmere Cream. I'm going to put this one right in the front here. Now, because they're members of the pea family, they really don't need massive sort of special preparation of the soil first. And before you put anything in like this, it's just as well to tidy up these bottom leaves. And then as soon as you put the plant into the ground, give it a good watering, get some sunshine, and this will make a lovely round rosette of these beautiful leaves. Right, in we go. I can't see those nitrogen nodules yet, but they'll be there eventually. What do you think about that? I like that there, just appearing in front of this peony. And of course, the peony flowers earlier. The smaller the space you've got, the more important it is to think about succession and things following on. So the peony actually makes this lovely kind of background with these big bold leaves, although its flowers are long since passed. And then the lupin comes to the forefront and says, "Look at me." Now for a lovely loud pink one in this corner. This is what you call squeezing it in. This is called Salmon Star. Look at that. It's the star of this corner anyway. Look at you. Aren't you lovely? I love it against that. Isn't that beautiful? So dainty and delicate and so big and strong and sturdy. Potagers were originally intended to be beautiful as well as practical spaces, with flowers, vegetables and herbs crammed in together. And I think this small bed shows just what you can achieve, even in a tiny space. Listen to these sparrows cheeping up there. Hello. They're really enjoying it. Do you know, I've never ever thought of myself as being a lupin person, but I really like these in here. I think they're a great addition to this bed. And it's nice, isn't it, always with gardening to be trying something new and experiment and be a bit adventurous. Whoever would have thought you could be adventurous with lupins, but of course you can. Next time I'm off to the seaside to see summer plants in the wild. You can just feel the wind blowing off the sea. It's just gorgeous. And I unearth my very own pots of gold. They really are like treasure, aren't they? I hope you've enjoyed your visit to Glebe Cottage, and I hope you'll join us next time. Until then, it's goodbye from me, the lupins and the sparrows.